Everyone loves the candidates tournament. So the biggest wins, the biggest plays, and most importantly, to this video, the biggest blunders happen. Every game, every single player is pushing for that victory because only one spot matters, and that is whoever will challenge the world champion. Of course, not the case last year, but this year, it's pretty much certain that Ding will defend his title, so every player is vying for that top spot at all costs. So this isn't no normal European super tournament where every player is going to play the Berlin and trot out a 15-move draw because they're too scared to lose any rating points. No. In this game, the freshest opening prep, the newest ideas, and the most daring sacrifices are played in order to win the most prestigious tournament in chess. So without further ado, let's get into this game. We have two of the greatest players right now. Young star Alireza Firouzja. I mean, it's almost weird to call him a young star because he's been around playing these top tournaments for so long. And of course, he decides to open with e4 against his opponent, Hikaru Nakamura. Hikaru decides to go e5. And in this game, we see an absolutely stunning blunder from Firouzja later in the game. So, knight to f3. We see an Italian game. Of course, this is the two knights, which does allow for the fried liver, which I've highlighted. But at top level, these guys all know all the theory. They're going to refute that. Well, not refute, but black gets some dynamic chances in the position. Let's just put it that way. d3. We see bishop to c5. Now transposing to the Italian game. And then we see the main move, which is c3. This is the gioco pianissimo, or the very quiet game, as translated from Italian. It's called that because there's going to be no fireworks for a little bit at least. Both sides going to try and positionally outmaneuver each other. And let's just hope for a good game. Basically, white might play on the queen side, white might play on the king side. Basically, depending on what black does, he sort of plays it by ear. And also, if white wants to do something quick, black will have to respond as well. So game could go really both ways here. And it's all about class and whoever can place their pieces on the most optimal squares. So h6, denying any piece from coming to g5, be it bishop or knight. And Alireza goes for b4. A move that can't say I've seen recently. I don't usually play the positional Italians. I try to go for more dynamic play. But this b4 is almost reminiscent of an Evans Gambit. And we see some Evans Gambit type ideas. Of course, the pawn isn't getting sacrificed here. You're just pushing the bishop away. So maybe I will play this in future. So the bishop goes back to e7, which is actually a training line against the Evans Gambit, which just shows you these b4 ideas. The bishops don't want to move away. Because of course, you can go to b4, but then you kind of are in an Evans Gambit after a4, so you don't want to allow that. You want to go to e7 where the bishop's just that bit safer. Queen to b3, common idea in the Evans. Of course, white isn't down a pawn here, so maybe his position's a little bit better. He's got more of an advantage. Just castles, of course, defending that pawn on f7 that was being tickled. And Alireza just lurches forward with a4, taking a huge amount of space on the queen side. And if you look at this from black's perspective, Hikaru's got some work to do here. I mean, white has a lot of space, nothing concrete yet. He's not up any material, but Hikaru really has to do a good job to get rid of the space advantage and try and get his pieces into the game and really get himself fighting. So he decides to naturally develop his pieces. Goes knight to b8, best move because b5 is coming. Okay, so has to undevelop there, but pretty normal stuff. Takes in the center, and now he goes a5, lashing out on that queen side. Just making sure that white doesn't have too much space. Otherwise, it continues with e5, trying to make advantage of he's got 4 pieces out and black only has 2. So black can't capture. Hikaru has to swing his knight over to the edge of the board, which looks a bit funny, but in a few moves we'll see his idea justified. Alireza closes the queen side. Now we see knight to f4, and after g4, or g3, sorry, attacking that knight, you think Hikaru would just drop it back, but no. The idea of this was d5, blocking out, arguably, white's best piece, this light squared bishop. In the Evans Gambit positions, this is known as the root of all evil because of all the sacrifices and things it can achieve, so blocking that out is a bit of a moral victory for the black pieces and Hikaru Nakamura. So the bishop goes back to f1, ready to make use of this natural home on g2 in the sort of fianchetto structure. The knight is forced to retreat, and the bishop just goes to his nice little sniper's nest on g2, ready to target long diagonal, maybe do some work damaging that queen side. c6, just castles, and then knight to d7. Alireza just goes bishop to b2. He doesn't want to capture on the queen side yet, because that sort of clarifies the structure too much, but he'll get there. The knight goes over, and now after takes, we see some concrete weaknesses in the black camp. We have a bit of a backwards pawn on c6, and we also see it's an isolated pawn on a5. So Alireza's got some targets to attack, but Hikaru's not going to go down without a fight. Bishop to c3 targeting the weakness, but is defended by the rook. Now Hikaru thinks for a long time. Hikaru actually thought here for 22 minutes before playing the best move in the position, c5. I've highlighted here a few things because I wanted to mention that this is like a Caro-Kann type move. This is like the Gotham Chess Caro-Kann, where you go for the c5. It's also reminiscent of the advanced French with this pawn structure. The reason Hikaru had to think for so long to determine if this was the best move is just because the pieces are not placed as they would be in an advanced French or a Caro-Kann. Normally you don't have a Fianchetto with Let's Go Bishop, and these pieces are really well placed. It's almost like the board is very open considering the closed center, and obviously Hikaru wants to open center the board up. So swings the rook over to the queen side, Hikaru defends, and this rook, as we're going to see, ends up looking quite awkward on the queen side, but Hikaru still manages to untangle. So captures, queen to b5, tickling the rook, of course not threatening to capture because the bishop does defend it. After queen to c7, rook to c1, lining up with the queen, so the queen moves back to a7, defending the rook. Alireza just goes queen back to e2, getting the queen out of there because it wasn't really doing too much. After the bishop slides over, he goes bishop to f1, setting the sneaky threat of capturing that rook. And maybe not sneaky because you can see the bishop going back, but long range idea, trying to capture that rook. Of course, the queen couldn't capture back because then the bishop would capture. So temporary queen sacrifice, trying to win the piece. And now his rook is completely trapped. You know, the queen and the knight cut off all its mobility. So Hikaru has to find the only move, knight to c4, interference, stopping Alireza. Alireza just proceeds pretty naturally. He attacks that bishop. The bishop goes back. And now rook to d1, putting a bit of pressure on that d5 pawn. Hikaru calmly defends it. Queen a8, a bit of a funny looking move to be fair. And Alireza wastes no time setting up a cheeky x-ray. Bishop to g2, trying to put pressure on that queen indirectly. Sorry to interrupt, this is Editing Zach here. I just want to say there's been a new thing in YouTube where even if you're watching my videos regularly, YouTube sometimes unsubscribes you. I also want to mention that not a lot of my viewers are subscribed, it's less than 10%. If you're enjoying the content so far, it actually helped me a lot if you could subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Thank you very much, and we'll get back to the video. Here Hikaru goes knight to c5. I mean, the engine doesn't particularly like, I think, because it just thinks after the exchanges, White's plan is a bit too simple, putting pressure on this isolated queen's pawn. The engine sort of more wanted to play a slower move, just like rook to c8, solidifying his position and not doing anything too hastily. But in the game, we see knight to c5, Alireza decides to capture and go with this plan. He plays knight to h4 instead, going with some sort of kingside initiative. This was a little bit inaccurate. The engine was wanting him to play knight to d4 and try and make use of this pawn here at a later date. Engine actually quite likes white here, because point A is decent advantage at this level of the game. But we see knight to h4 played by Alireza, knight to b6 by Hikaru rotating around. Now the trade is invited. Hikaru obliges. It's actually a completely equal position now, so all trades are going to be favoring, well not favoring, but okay for both sides. As we see, Alireza actually starts to generate some play here. After rook to a7, obviously he decides to just play a quick sort of more waiting move, h3, preparing g4 in the future. Rook to c7, there's that idea g4, and now he's actually going to start a kingside pawn storm. So the queen moves over, the queen slides up now. After a few more moves, the piece come off the board, but now he's got these two pawns, the E and F, ready to race up the board. It looks quite scary. But when you naturally set up to advance them and do advance, the problem is the queens come off the board, so now it's not so clear. Obviously, you can't just take right away because you end up in a bit of a pickle with this passed pawn. But Hikaru calmly just goes knight to f6, and after rook d4, threatening the pawn, it's just defended, so he slides the king over. Rook d2. Now we're in a complete equal endgame, so how do we get a decisive result? Hikaru has stopped all of Alireza's play. It's completely even. Bishop for knight. If anyone's for choice, it's black, just because he's got this pawn that can actually move right now. So rook to b2, threatening to infiltrate. Hikaru brings his rook to support. Bishop to f1. The knight comes in on a very nice square on e4. If you want to kick that knight away, you're going to be left with a nasty surprise of knight to g6, forking both of your pawns. So that knight can't actually be dislodged right now, at least. We see bishop to d3, threatening to trade off that strong knight. The knight moves out of the way, and then now f4, the kingside pawn storm begins. Hikaru advancing his own pawn, the rook slides over, but now you have g5 by Hikaru, completely nullifying that. He pushes, but the knight's just going to come back. Pawn gets attacked, doesn't matter. The check. Hikaru moves his king over, and now we get an interesting scenario because Alireza sacrifices a pawn for huge activity. Rook to f5, the only move. After rook takes, king takes. Hang on a minute, who's going to stop the pawn? Well, actually, the pawn can't be stopped, because if you want to bring the rook back and swing that over, Alireza is just going to go bishop to b5, and then the rook can't move. You have to sacrifice it for the pawn. That's going to be completely losing. So Hikaru has to find something here, and he does. He's got knight takes d3. Now, the pawn can't be supported when it goes up, but can't Alireza just queen? Well, he can, but after rook takes, and then knight to f4, Black's actually up 2 pawns and has a pass pawn in the center of the board, which he's just going to push. So the pass pawn moves. He actually manages to grab the knight with the decoy of this pawn in the center. And now he's up 3 pawns. So Alireza's got his work cut out for him defensively. He plays the best move, king to e3, monitoring the progress of that pawn there. But Hikaru plays a cam g4. Now it's not so obvious what Alireza should do. And of course, there's one move that's extremely natural, and that's king to d3, taking the pawn, but actually blunders away the entire game. Because after g3, hard to see how Alireza missed this, to be fair. I mean, it's such a natural move. A few hours into the game, it's easy to make mistakes like this, but just goes to show grandmasters can blunder too, because there's no way to stop this pawn. If you want to bring that rook back, I just push, because the knight is controlling the square. Of course, you can't do that. And the sneakier solution is if you go behind the pawn, you push, you're thinking, okay, no worries. I mean, the king isn't fast enough, so I'll just grab that. But no, you walk into a fork, knight to f4 check, hits the king, hits the rook, one's got to go. If you move that king, that rook will be captured. And then the king is going to block, and this pawn is going to promote, and that's all she wrote for Alireza Firouzja. So a crushing loss with the white pieces against Hikaru. Hikaru somewhat back in on an even scoreline. Let me know who you're rooting for in the comments below. And hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video.